The digestive tract begins in the oral cavity, which is right here. It begins when you use your teeth to chew up food, so it breaks it down into smaller pieces, and you use your tongue to move it around so that you can get it to your back teeth, like your molars and stuff, to grind it. And once food enters your mouth, your salivary glands release saliva, which helps lubricate, and it begins the process of breaking down food because it contains amylase, which makes it easier for the stomach to break down starches in food. And your saliva also begins carbohydrate breakdown. Saliva also plays a role in oral health by preventing infections, maintaining healthy teeth, and keeping away bad breath. When food is chewed up, it is termed a bolus, which is like the ball of the chewed up food. And when you go to swallow the bolus, it passes through the upper esophageal sphincter, where it passes into the esophagus. But while you're swallowing, your glottis, which would be up in here somewhere, it is like a slit-like opening in your throat, which is where your respiratory tract begins. So a little fold of muscle called the epiglottis will fold over it, so it closes while you're swallowing to prevent choking. When food enters, peristalsis starts in the esophagus. So peristaltic movements, which is just like the wave-like contractions of smooth muscle, begins in the esophagus, and it will push food all the way down until it gets to the lower esophageal sphincter, which is at the beginning of the stomach. That will open, and then it'll go into your stomach, and it'll go into the stomach, which the stomach has 3 layers: the outer longitudinal, the middle circular, and the inner oblique muscles. They all contract to help break up the bolus so that it's farther apart, so that it's easier to break apart, since it's not all it increases the surface area, so it's easier to break down. They all contract to break up the bolus. Contractions paired with bile secretions from the gallbladder, as well as pancreatic juices containing enzymes that help break down sugars, fats, and starches, turn the bolus into a mixture called chyme, which the pancreas. So here's the stomach, here's the pancreas, there's the liver, and right there's the gallbladder. The liver makes the bile, and the bile is stored in the gallbladder, which releases it into the stomach. And the pancreas is right here, which creates the pancreatic juices in the stomach, and then later it also produces pancreatic amylase to the small intestine. But there are 3 glands in the stomach: the cardiac gland, the intermediate gland, and the pyloric gland. The cardiac gland and the pyloric gland both secrete mucus to line the inside of the stomach, so that the stomach, to prevent ulcers and stuff, so that the stomach acid inside the stomach won't burn through the stomach. It's basically self-protection. And the intermediate gland produces most of the digestive substances, including the hydrochloric acid, but that's because the cardiac gland is up here, the pyloric gland is down here, but the intermediate gland is in the middle, which is where most of the food is going to be. That's why it produces the digestive enzymes instead of one of the other ones, because most of the food is going to be in the middle, because peristalsis will work it down into the middle, and it can't go through down into the small intestine until the until the hepatopancreatic sphincter at the beginning of the duodenum opens. But the inner lining of the stomach is made up of something called rugae. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's basically just little tiny folds on the inside of your stomach that increase the surface area. And it also allows for like people that eat more, it allows for stretching of the stomach, like not harmful stretching of the stomach when there's increased food intake or the stomach is full. So the food then goes through to the small intestine through the hepatopancreatic sphincter at the beginning of the duodenum. And the small intestine, it's a really bad drawing, but the small intestine, this is the large intestine all the way up, like around there. This mess in the middle is the small intestine. It's made up of three parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum, which is the long part. The main job of the small intestine is to work on completing digestion, and it is also supposed to absorb nutrients from what is being broken down. Inside of the small intestine are some things called brush borders as well as the plicae circularis. The brush border is an internal, like it's on the intestinal lining of the small intestine, and it is the final site of carb digestion. So it'll finish breaking down the carbs that weren't broken down before. And the plicae circularis is also in the lining of the small intestine, and its function is to increase the surface area so there's more room for nutrient absorption. Segmentation also occurs in the small intestine, and it's basically just the contraction of the inner circular muscles to churn the chyme so that it's easier. It helps break it down, kind of like the contraction of the three layers of the stomach muscles in the stomach help churn that to break it down. It's the same, segmentation is the same thing in the small intestine, it's just with the inner circular muscles. And then this chyme enters the large intestine right here. It connects right there at the ileocecal valve, which would be right there at the beginning of the small intestine, and it enters the cecum. The cecum is basically just a holding place for the stuff that comes out of the small intestine. So once it's full, it will trigger the muscles to start contracting, and the mixture will then go up the ascending. I don't know how to hold this. Everything's backwards. Up the ascending colon and across to the left to the through the transverse colon. And the jobs of both of these parts of the colon is to absorb all the water, turn it into a solid so that when it goes down the descending can do its job. It turns it into a solid by absorbing out all the water to help maintain homeostasis, like the levels of water in the body. And they also secrete mucus to help with like the lubrication of the mixture, since it's not a watery, it secretes mucus so that it doesn't like shred your large intestine. And once it goes across there, the solid waste that resembles like poop or feces or whatever you want to call it, moves down the descending colon right here. And the job of the descending colon is where the descending colon and the sigmoid colon is where the gut bacteria finishes breaking down like the mixture, and it's where key vitamins such as vitamin B and vitamin K are produced. And then waste goes through the sigmoid colon right here to the rectum. And basically the rectum is like where it goes before you poop. And when it enters the rectum, it basically triggers like the urge to go to the bathroom. So then the interior anal sphincter will open, and the anus is basically just the passage to like get it out. It's like what people call like the butthole would be the exterior anal sphincter. So the interior has to open before the waste can go into the anus, and once it opens, it goes down through the anus and to the exterior anal sphincter, which is like the muscle you can control, and then you defecate.